discussion with the Director General of Treasury Dondo Mogajane, who joins us still as we continue to unpack, DG, the IMF's Executive Board extending the 70 billion rand loan to support South Africa's response to COVID-19. And you and I have been discussing the issue around ensuring that every cent of that money goes where it should go. One of the big stories, as I'm sure you know, leading our agenda this morning is the issue around the allegations Kusela Diko's husband being involved in tender irregularities, along with the Gauteng Health MEC, Bandile Masuku. Now, this is the big question here, because there's some confusion around if I am an employee of government, whether those in my immediate family can do business with government. So the question to you, should families of government employees be allowed to do business with the state?
Look, currently, firstly, just talking about the merits of the issue, obviously I cannot comment. I know Gauteng government is dealing with that and let them deal with it. But on your question around whether family members, I think currently there's nowhere in terms of, the current legal prescripts as per the Public Service Act, including what governs us as a state, as public servants, that family members cannot obviously do business with the state. I mean, if you have a family member who is, like I'm from Northwest and somebody is living in Matuke and they are my cousin and they are business people, they can do business. It will be illegal for them to actually not do business. It will be very legal in terms of the law for them not to do any business with the state. It would be unfair. They obviously they can take us to court. But the reality is that if my brother or my cousin wants to do business with National Treasury, and I am obviously, I mean and I'm part of the decision-making process, that's going to be wrong. It cannot be that I would sit in a tender committee or in a bid arbitration committee where I know my brother's company is part of that. It is wrong, and it's obviously, and all ethical issues coming here, and it's important that we don't allow such things to happen. But I think it will be unfair and people can take us to task if we basically bar them just because they happen to be family members. But this is my personal view, obviously, on this matter, as you asked of my personal view. I mean, for sure.
Sorry, I'm going to come in there and ask you this. You're talking about your brother or your cousin. What about your intimate partner? The optics of me being a senior member of government and my intimate partner does business with government at the time of a pandemic with a business that was started a year ago and has absolutely no track record. On the face of it, I'm not asking you to comment on the case and the allegations against Kusela Diko and her husband, but on the face of those facts, what is your take on that?
Look, the facts obviously have to be tested, and I cannot comment on the facts that I'm not aware or I haven't seen. Certainly, I mean, as Treasury, we've got a role there. We obviously have to ask Gauteng government in terms of questions directly related to this matter and get the details thereof. But you are right.
It leaves a lot of room for wiggling, doesn't it? For there to be no, line drawn in the sand to say, if you are a senior government official and you have your intimate partner doing business with a government department like Gauteng Health, if you have business relationships there, if you have family relationships there, that should not happen. For us to say that there are no set rules governing that kind of behavior, it leaves a lot of room for malfeasance, don't you think?
No, certainly. And I think we have to guard against it. That's why it's important that accounting officers, because I, for instance, don't have control as to what happened in Gauteng Health, but the accounting officer in the Department of Health in Gauteng should ensure that all of the processes and tender processes are above board. And where there's evidence of wrongdoing, that must be dealt with. So I'm simply saying to you that it's important that we don't come up with rules that we can have that can backfire against individual rights and the rights that individuals have in conducting any business with the state. Section 217 of the Constitution is very clear that procurement process must be transparent, fair, competitive bidding process. All of those things we have to, as public officials, as treasuries, as provincial accounting officers, everyone should ensure that we abide by those prescripts as set out in the law, and not only but in the supreme law, which is the Constitution.
So, DG, the President, when he addressed the nation last week, he talked about dealing very strongly with any COVID-19 related corruption. We know that there are certain deviations that are allowed for in the wake of the pandemic. But what are some of the measures that have been put in place, as far as you know, to deal with those kinds of loopholes?
Look, firstly, we issued a Treasury instruction in May already, whereby we were directing accounting officers what's expected of them, what risk mitigation measures they must put in place, what internal structures within departments must put in place, only specific for COVID-19. So accounting officers and CFOs and supply chain specialists know exactly what needs to happen. Secondly, I think I'm in constant discussion with the AG, Auditor General, Mr. Kimi Makwetu, in terms of what to look for and how to go about looking for things that suggest that rules and prescripts are not followed. Thirdly, I think accounting officers need to be held accountable. Where there's wrongdoing in terms of what the President has put together, let those structures, the independent structures that the President was talking about last week, let them come to work in terms of ensuring that if the personal gains that are untoward, where there's overpricing, where there was collusion in terms of supplies with officials, that on its own, people must be brought to book, and we shouldn't leave anything to waste in ensuring that we act above board in this context that we're in currently.
So you talk about the Auditor General, and in fact, Kimi Makwetu has been on the AMReport, and I had this exact discussion with him, and I asked him, when we take a look at COVID-19 corruption, shouldn't it be as simple, and this is my take as a layperson, I'm not an economist, but shouldn't it be as simple to go and look at that tender document, take a look at who signed off the awarding of that tender, and just as easy as that, where there are any accounting irregularities, the person who is responsible for that money, who signed off on that money, and that's how we hold people accountable.
That's exactly what we're going to do. I mean, we've got, as a start, a reference price list that a mask can only be so much. As an example, if we say a 3-ply surgical mask should be 10 rand, for instance, why should someone go and award that same mask for 15 rand or for 20 rand or for 12 rand when the Treasury guidelines are clear in terms of the price settings that we have agreed upon? Now, again, somebody who signed off on that award must then be held accountable. If it means they must be fired, they should be fired. If it means there must be some criminality can be demonstrated and proven,
but
they must actually be...
But what we see happening, DG, is a statement is released to say it's being investigated. What you're saying should happen is not happening.
Look, I can tell you now, like any court process, any legal process, you know and I know, the audi alterum partem rule must apply. You must hear the other party. Some people must have explanations. Unfortunately, that's how you cannot, as much as it's important, someone must acknowledge what they're doing. We must have proof that someone did wrong, and then act accordingly. So, but what